Welcome back to the Tough Love Podcast with Dr. John O'Connor. Today we're going to talk about 2025 and what that means for me, and maybe I give you some insight and some motivation to attack your 2025 as I'm looking at it as a 2.0, if you will, for me. And probably starting this podcast, it's going to be about new business ventures, new approaches to existing business, rebuilding relationships, old and new, and just really dialing into making sure I finish with a higher level of consistency and execute. One of the things that I've been really studying, in the self-improvement genre of podcast hosts and guests is something that I see with my top 5 guys is their ability to finish at a remarkably high level. And as I always bring it back to sports, it's whether you're talking about Wayne Gretzky on ice or, Derek Jeter on the diamond or Michael Jordan on the basketball court, these, phenomenal Hall of Fame level athletes always executed. And, what I've seen of, as I sat there and did some really deep diving over the last couple of weeks was I identified all the business ventures that I've been in the past. And I put the pros, the cons, what I learned from it, what I wouldn't have done twice, these kind of things. And I really found that one of the consistent themes was that I would, much like a New Year's resolution, I would literally wane off or fade off quite consistently. And, I think so many people that are in my network or that I'm friendly with will come at me and say, you're a grinder, you're so impressed, with what you're doing all the time, always going. But sometimes that's just scatter. I think that I almost found that to be a little bit more of a dig than anything, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm touching a lot of things, but what am I doing well? And I was actually listening to Andy Frisilla today on a podcast while I was out deer hunting for opening days, the deer season this year. And he said something that really hit home for me. It was resonating because he talked about getting to things that are not in your wheelhouse or you don't embrace or, just because you're having a successful run. And that brought me back to my freehold space that I took it on 5 years too late. That should have been something I took on at 40, not 45. And, when I was at the top of my game and, it just wasn't there. And at 45, it was ego and an afterthought, and I got pulled into an opportunity quite recently. And, some friends put me in contact with some other people and we're opening up another medical entity in a different county north of where we exist. And I'm super excited. The team is very different than anything that I've worked for or with before. And I'm looking forward to that. But most importantly, everything that I'm touching in 2025 is about pure passion. And, I had a fantastic meeting with one of our podcast sponsors, and that's MedRay Laser and Technology. And I'm taking a much more active role in 2025 with regards to coaching and teaching about the products that we use and just being much more of a presence on all of our social media platforms. And I think for me, what really inspired me was looking at, somebody that I'm going to see live in Arizona, Andy Elliott, and he's talking about hostage tape, right? And here I am as a clinical provider, and I work with some major brands. And, I had a good friend, again, I had said this in a previous podcast, say to me, you have everything you need in your back pocket. You need to take a better look and, take an assessment of your inventory and start there. And I had a phone meeting on Friday, and essentially one of the owners had said that they'd like to see me take a more active role. And I think initially going back to where I think a lot of my almost deals happens, what I found, and I think this may resonate with a lot of you, is I was touching a bunch of things, but not mastering things. And so, I was cooking a deal with, Pulse Penf. I was cooking a deal with Cryoscience. I had something going with, these different companies. And excuse me, not that they mean anything to you guys as you're listening, but you could be there in previous, life experiences, whether you're working as a trainer in a gym, or you're a real estate agent, or you're a student, or you're a teacher and you're looking to do side hustles, and you're doing a bunch of things, but you're not crushing anything. And, busy, I heard a great line: don't confuse busy with productive. And I really started thinking about that. Like, I do a very good job of giving off the perception that I am ridiculously busy. But when I feel my best and where I feel like I'm satisfying my, goals and accomplishment list is when I'm actually getting things done and I'm, winning at executing. That's when I feel my team is running the smoothest, my business is running the smoothest, and I'm most satisfied with the challenges I'm putting up for myself and satisfying or, overachieving for that matter. The biggest thing, if I had to peel that apart, is, how do you get there? And, for me, it's the team that's around you. Again, the funny thing about it is, for any of you that haven't been hunting before, when you start a morning sit, when you're on stand, you're sitting in the dark. So you have like an hour and a half where you're kind of just sitting there listening to, all the sounds in the woods. And I listened to 3 podcasts this morning, kind of just waiting for the sun to crack the tree line and be able to see something. And, again, I look at it like, how do I maximize my time? And I was kind of thinking about, this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. I really want people to say, when they get out of this podcast, John had a great idea and I've definitely been there. I could relate to that and I'm going to try that. And so for me, whether I'm coaching or consulting or seeing patients at, one of our 2 locations, whether it's at the Ford Athletic Club or Velocity, our hub office in Red Bank, I want to be much more focused. And, when you're doing that, I feel like the fulfillment level, both self and external to your staff and the patients and everybody and your clients, is tenfold better. So getting back to how to accomplish these things, I'm making a point to start January, the last 3 weeks of this 2024 calendar year. I'm really doing an inventory of things that I want to keep in my life and, so to speak, sharpen the blade, and things that don't serve me, and kind of get them off my list, get them off my plate, and really focus on making this 51st year that I'm entering in my life the best year I've had probably in the last 10 with regards to being an expert in the industry that I'm in, branching out into another industry and really kind of, digging in that, the coaching space. And probably my most recent newest venture is and you see it all over my podcast and my social media page, my pursuit of fitness. My pursuit of fitness isn't really about fitness per se. It's about overcoming fear. It's about discipline and execution, discipline in, making sure that every Sunday, even during holiday season, that I'm taking 2 hours and plus an hour of, acquiring the food, and 3 hours every Sunday for what seems like 2 years, and making sure my food and my week is set up so that I can execute what I need to be doing. And, when it comes to the physical fitness component, so many of these posts that I share with my team saying, hey guys, I really like this message, is everybody wants to be the perfect body in the picture, but I don't think anybody wants to go through the work or the hurt or the recovery that comes behind the scenes. And one of my things that I make sure that I post and put out there is like my early morning routine, because that's what I do to maintain, my level of fitness. And more importantly, to make sure my recovery is on par with my performance, gains, workouts, etc. Something that I kind of had an epiphany with the other day in my main career, if you will, is picking the practices and practitioners that I choose to work with as, I'm anticipating a huge growth year in 2025. And if they're not caught up to the times and don't get behind what we're doing in our practice, then, essentially we won't be using them. And if that means that I have to spend extra time building out new relationships, then the reality is instead of us creating a counterproductive relationship or holding on to something we really should be letting go of, we're going to really work on creating, these bonds or new bonds of relationships that really build out something that is, consistent with the new version of Velocity, that is in the same philosophy of what we preach with regards to, per se, Velocity Performance and Sports Rehab, our core 4 technology with regards to utilizing sciences and science that's proven to accelerate healing and all these things. And, sometimes I hear, different specialists talk and I get feedback, and I used to get upset with it because it used to be more about my primary profession as a chiropractic physician. But now they're talking about science that has documentation that's being used by their peers. And then it becomes more ignorance that I see, because when I see huge hospitals and those surgeons going with these modalities, then I realize that it's just some doctors and practices and, aren't, on the same page with being consistent with what's out there. So not to, we'll table that for another discussion. But again, to stay consistent with growth in 2025, essentially I'm putting everybody on notice, because again, I'm not going to change what I do to make them happy. They need to adjust and be educated. And if they, can be accepting of the technology and they can read it and understand it, then I can work with them. And if they can't, then we can part ways amicably. So I think that's a big part of one of the messages for today is looking at your business, and a relationship that may have served you 5-10 years ago may no longer serve you. And it's time to grow. I saw a very dear friend at the gym the other day, and he's probably got me by 10 years. And I remember hearing this when I was in my 20s about aging out, that all your referrals or your contacts have retired or moved away or both. And so your business lifelines are rapidly fading. And the bottom line is, the one thing that I have prided myself over the last, probably since COVID, was the realization that reinvention is consistent with resurgence. And if you want to have to be reborn, rebirthing, if you will, that means you must, and again, I'm using over and again, recreate and be consistent with that, so you don't fall back into old patterns, old versions of yourself, your business, to grow and to draw a different type of audience. The one thing that I see in the social media space, and I know a lot of the social media analysts out there, they're not necessarily, just talking about what they're delivering and selling, but they're analyzing what the social media experts and the social media management teams are putting out there, and how they're trying to entice and draw eyes on their material they're putting out there. And that's something that you really have to take in consideration. And, I know with my team, my guys are in the background of the set right now, we're constantly working on that. Like, we spent, 15 minutes, setting and prepping for the podcast, and 45 minutes getting the room set up. And that entire time, we're going over ideas, we're going over different imagery, we're going over different things because we're constantly trying to stimulate our audience in a way that was different from yesterday, last week, last month, last year. And, again, why is that critical? It's critical because you want to constantly be fresh. I feel like, not only do you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your viewers, you owe it to your population, and I think in sports, it was always a great line. And I had a couple coaches that would say this to me, whether I was working alongside them when I was training or even back in my playing days decades ago, is what helped you win yesterday will not guarantee you a win today. And whatever you're doing today will set the tone for tomorrow and ultimately your fate. And, now as I'm getting older, and a lot more wise, if you will, the wisdoms from that, really as I reflect on it, it's, you usually, take for granted what you have as opposed to being grateful for what you have. And most people don't think about tomorrow. They think about stuffing their face today, and they're not ready for, what next Friday looks like or next month. And they're not planning for that rainy day. So I think that's a huge part. So again, 2025 boot camp preparation for, John O'Connor Entertainment and everything that I do is really about just tightening up all aspects of our communication, our social media, our coaching, and try to make it as consistent as, again, so many doctors are in the health space now. There's a wonderful pharmacist that always talks about the importance of strength training and exercise and nutrition. Does a great job, has a gazillion followers. But the reality is it's always pillars of consistency in nutrition, a minimum amount of cardiovascular exercise, a minimum amount of strength training, a minimum amount of rest, a minimum amount of relaxation techniques. And again, talking about those pillars and whatever you create those pillars are. But the ultimate reality is it's not about being motivated. It's about being consistent. And, motivation fades. Consistency and intention, that's really what's going to drive it home and ultimately raise your level of success. I want to look at this last month of December as a great time to reflect, to be so thankful for the year that I've had, to have made it through the year that I've had. And, most importantly, to really, just be grateful for the amazing family and my wife and my beautiful daughter and son, and just be, looking forward to what this year brings and the new year brings. And, every day attack with purpose, intention, and the same consistency that I'm doing in other things to make sure that 2025 is the best year yet. At any rate, guys, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. Today was all about 2025 and recreating a new version of yourself. I think a lot of people get super motivated that last few days before the new year. This is something that I've been working on for a long time. We have many new businesses this year. I have, personally taken on, going after and seeking out new coaches to motivate myself because, again, even coaches need coaches. And so, if you enjoyed this podcast, maybe take some notes and think about who you're mentoring with. And if you don't have one, maybe seek one out and really try to level up this year. At any rate, we grow by likes and follows and sharing this podcast. So please do so if you've enjoyed this and found some value in it. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon.